வெளிகளில் இமயமாய் நிமிர்ந்து நிற்கும் உங்கள் RTV தமிழ். RTV தமிழ்.
வணக்கம் நேயர்களே, நீங்கள் பார்த்து கொண்டிருப்பது டேர்னிங் பாயிண்ட் நிகழ்ச்சி. நான் உங்கள் கௌரிசன் ரத்னராஜா கதைக்கின்றேன். இன்றும் RTV தமிழ் இன்டர்நேஷனல் மூலமாக டேர்னிங் பாயிண்ட் இந்த வாரமும் பார்த்து கொண்டிருக்கிறீர்கள். இன்று நான் ஒரு மாற்றுத்திறனாளியை பேட்டியான இருக்கின்றேன். அவர் இலங்கை இங்கிலாந்தை சேர்ந்தவர். இவற்றை பேர் மைக் பிரேஸ். இவர் ஒரு ஸ்போர்ட்ஸ் பர்சனாலிட்டி மற்றும் கணக்க வாலண்டியர் ஒர்க்குகளும் செய்திருக்கின்றார். அவரை நாங்கள் கலையத்துக்கு அழைத்துக் கொள்வோம். Good evening, Mike.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to my show. Thanks for coming. This show is sponsored by StreamYard.com. And if you want to watch this show, you need to subscribe to YouTube channel and Facebook. And you can watch it on Eagle TV in Canada as well. How are you this evening, Mike?
Very good. Yeah, no, very good indeed. It's been a fairly quiet day today, so that's been quite nice.
That's good. That's good. Yes, relaxing today then, is it?
Relaxing, yeah.
Oh, yeah, good. That's good. So, yes, sorry to hear our Prince Philip passed away a few days ago.
Yes, that was a big shock, and I've had the privilege of meeting him over the years 2 or 3 times, and so it was slightly more than just someone you'd heard of. It was someone you'd actually met and had a discussion with. So so very sad.
Yeah, it is sad. So yeah. So your basic, we're going to talk about your life and also your the last book and also the current book you published, and also your sports and also your award, the CBE and OBE award as well from Royal Family, and also few information about yourself and education. Yeah, is that okay with you?
Yeah, sounds good.
That's good. Can you tell us about your blindness, Mike, if you don't mind?
Okay. I was brought up in London Borough of Hackney, and my mum worked in a shoe factory. My dad was a night watchman. And like most kids, I was very much into my football and cricket and stuff at school and played for the school team. And then in the half-term holidays in November 1960, I was playing football over the local park, saw some kids gathered around one end of the park where we were playing. I went over and said, "What are you doing?" They told me to get lost or go away. Being a 10-year-old with a bit of attitude, I refused to just do what they said. Looked down on the floor, and there was a black medicine bottle with the lid screwed on. And they were all looking at it, and I thought, "Oh, well, what's that?" So I bent down and picked the bottle up. I think one of them did tell me to go, not do it, but I ignored him. And the banger, the firework inside the bottle then blew up. And so the glass went into one of my eyes and cut my face. And that meant I got carted off to hospital. The eye that wasn't injured eventually developed a condition called sympathetic ophthalmia and uveitis. So the sight in the good eye went to nothing. And I had a little bit of sight in the eye that was cut. And about 2.5 years after my accident, I blew a trumpet at a football match to make as much noise to support my team as possible. And unfortunately, the pressure of blowing the trumpet then hemorrhaged the back of the eye and detached the retina. So I actually woke up aged about 12 and a half, 13, totally blind.
So you're a naughty boy at that time, then, is it?
Well, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I was unlucky. I was unlucky.
Yeah,
Wrong place, wrong time,
that's it. Yeah,
and then I just ignored the warnings. Really, I didn't know what they were possibly doing, and paid the consequence. Really.
yeah. It's true. It's true. Yeah, yeah. So can you, from that, can you tell us about your education for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, bearing in mind this was 1960, so services and structures for education were pretty basic, really. In those days, if you really couldn't see very much, you either went to a special school, or if you could cope, very few people did, would stay in an ordinary sighted school or ordinary school. My sight wasn't enough at all, so I initially went to a partially sighted school fairly locally to me. So you were picked up by a bus in the morning and dropped back in the afternoon, but it just meant obviously no after school activities. But quite honestly, I just couldn't see enough to even cope with that. So almost a year after I'd had my accident, I was then sent to a boarding school on the other side of London, called Linden Lodge, and that basically was a school for the blind and the partially sighted, or people that were going to go blind. And so the first 6 months of my time there, I just did Braille only, because obviously I couldn't read or write anymore with not using Braille, so I had to learn Braille. So I did nothing at all for 6 months other than Braille. And that got me to a level of competency that meant I could either look at certainly reading books and writing stuff for myself, homework, and also possibly sitting an entrance examination to go to the grammar school. I was supposed to have gone to a grammar school. In those days, they had the 11 plus, where if you passed that, then you went to a grammar school. I was scheduled to pass the 11 plus. I wasn't the brightest, but I was certainly okay. But by the time I got to 12, there was this grammar school entrance to go to a grammar school for the blind called Worcester College. To be honest, I didn't try very hard. It was bad enough going from Hackney to the other side of London. The thought of going from Hackney to Worcester, I just wasn't interested. So I didn't pass the entrance exam, and therefore then stayed at the blind school, which again was good from many respects for sport and for links and people I met, but very poor from an education point of view. When I left the school age 17, I'd managed to get the most O-level passes in the history of the school to that date, which was 2 O-levels and a grade CSE grade 1, which was an O-level pass. So I ended up with 3 equivalent O-levels, which really wouldn't do you very good. And therefore, in those days, people then said, okay, well, people at your level will either go in to be a typist, an audio typist, a piano tuner, or go into a factory. I went off to do shorthand typing, and qualified as a shorthand typist from a specialist college, and then went into work aged 18 in the civil service as a shorthand typist.
That's good. That's good. So what do you think, is a controversial question. Do you think the blind people who can read Braille is good for spelling and grammar than blind people they're using technology?
Oh, I think it certainly does give you a structure of print and the formatting of the language. I think sometimes the grade 2 Braille could, obviously Braille is into different formats. You have grade 1, which is the alphabet, grade 2, which is contracted, and you have grade 3, which is shorthand, which is what I did. Okay. And so I think seeing the words helps, but obviously it is complicated by the fact that that it is contracted. So therefore, it's not as big a help to spelling as it might be, but certainly much, much better than not having any form of print under your fingers at all. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. So can you tell us about your family, Mike, if you don't know?
Yeah. I've got a half brother and 2 half sisters, and a step brother, and we all came and lived around Hackney, and then in the early 70s I met my wife. I was actually singing in a folk group, and she was our sort of groupie, really. She got our food and drink for us when we were having our group practices, and then I went to a party and she had to see me home to my brother's because I was stranded, and then we went out from that. So we've been married 50 years next year. It's our golden one anniversary in 2022.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's good. ஆமாம் நேர்களே, நீங்கள் பார்த்து கொண்டிருப்பது டர்னிங் பாயிண்ட் நிகழ்ச்சி. உங்கள் ஆர்டிவி தமிழ் இன்டர்நேஷனல் மூலமாக பார்த்து கொண்டிருக்கிறீர்கள். இன்று நான் மாற்றுத்திறனாளி மைக் பிரேஸை பேட்டியான இருக்கின்றேன். இவர் ஒரு பார்வையற்ற ஒரு விளையாட்டுத்துறை பர்சனாலிட்டி அவர்கள். மீண்டும் அவரை பற்றி அறிந்து கொள்ள இந்த டர்னிங் பாயிண்ட் அனுசரை வழங்கி கொண்டிருக்கின்றார்கள் streamyard.com.
Welcome to Braille Translations. We have many years' experience providing Braille to our customers. Leaflets, signs, restaurant menus, or entire books. We're here to help. We can also provide Braille in many world languages, and no matter what the job, big or small, we can assist you with your needs. Please call us on 0800 019 0946 or visit our website at www.brailletranslations.co.uk. That's www.brailletranslations.co.uk.
A to Z Indian Grocery Free Home Delivery.
अब पाए सभी भारतीय और श्रीलंका की ग्रोसरी, सब्जियां और सी फूड और भी बहुत कुछ सिर्फ A to Z इंडियन ग्रोसरी होम डिलीवरी पर, वो भी किफायती दामों में। और इतना ही नहीं, पाए मुफ्त होम डिलीवरी पूरे नीदरलैंड में कहीं भी। तो देर किस बात की, अभी ऑर्डर करने के लिए या अधिक जानकारी के लिए संपर्क करें 0630824166 पर। अब A to Z इंडियन ग्रोसरी होम डिलीवरी के साथ अपना समय और पैसा दोनों बचाएं।
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Welcome back. So we are asking about your education, your family, and your blindness earlier on. Can you tell me about what kind of Braille technology do you use at the moment, or you used to use?
Well, it's interesting, really, because before, obviously, computers came in, the old-fashioned stuff. So I used a Stainsby Braille and then a Perkins Braille, which was a major step forward because you could read what you'd written immediately. And in maths, for instance, you could put your calculations down, and your teachers then could see what you'd done. So, moving on to the Perkins was a big step forward. And then in the 80s, when I was working, I really did need to tackle the whole technology bit. So I used an old-fashioned machine called the Versa Braille, which used a cassette to prompt the Braille display and to be able to input onto that. Then obviously that got superseded by the Versa Text, so I used that, which used 5 1/4-inch floppies in the machine. Then it moved to the 3 3.5-inch ones, and then I moved on to MS-DOS with a Braille output, and then when obviously the whole computers went over to Windows, I've used an 80-cell old-fashioned Braille display, and now I use a Brailliant 40 display for my computer. I use an Apex Braille machine for my reading on the move, and I've got an Everest embosser in the garage if I need to produce some sheets of Braille.
That's good. That's good. So I was speaking to other guests as well before. Basically, the Braille laptops like Everest, Apex or Brilliant, it's quite expensive, isn't it, for a blind person point of view, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, obviously, they are now looking to bring the prices down to see if you can get stuff that is all singing, all dancing. The problem when you're working, I needed something that had a diary facility. I had something that you could put USBs in. You could read during meetings, so you didn't want speech. You wanted to be able to read the Braille agendas. Then you wanted, obviously, the other facilities to link it to machines. More and more of the machines now are into thousands that have all of that versatility. And so I think it's going to be down to one that will give me the basics, but will then probably use my iPhone and my iPad as the sort of driving background to it.
That's good. That's good. So we'll come back to we'll come to your career. So you've done 2 jobs. First, you've done stenographic typing. Is that right?
Yeah. And then I moved on. Well, I've had 3 jobs really. I moved on from there. When I was in the civil service, after 2 weeks, I realised I was in the wrong job. I thought I wasn't very civil and I was no one's servant, but I didn't really have the qualifications to do much about it. So I went to evening classes and did a correspondence course as well, and managed to then get 2 A levels, advanced levels in sociology and English, and decided then I'd do something with it. So I then applied, and after that took me 6 years to get those 2 qualifications. And after that time, I then applied and got a place at a polytechnic to do a social work diploma course, a 2-year social work diploma course. And when I qualified as that, I then luckily then managed to walk straight into a job in one of the London boroughs, and then progressed through there. I worked for 4 different local authorities, starting off as a basic grade social worker. Then I became a manager. Then I managed in a residential establishment. Then I became a service manager. And the last posting I had, I left as an assistant director for children's services in one of the London boroughs. And I gave that up then to set up my last job, which was as chief executive of Vision 2020 UK, which is part of a global movement around sight and sight loss. But I then headed up and set up the UK version of it.
Okay, that's good. We'll come back to that. We'll come to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So what did you do in the social worker, working the social worker department? So you helped you work in a children department?
I started off in the early days, it was generic. So you did children's, you did adults, you did older people. And a lot of the stuff I was doing was juvenile offenders, etc. Then they started to become more and more specialised in terms of, the types of work you did. So I started to do more and more children's work, did a bit of a job as a manager in the department when my manager went off sick, and I got promoted to manage the team. And then a job opportunity came up, which was a bit of a challenge, really, and that was to become a manager of an assessment and potentially prison unit for adolescent girls on a regional basis back in Hackney. And it covered 8 boroughs, but it was the high end. So we had a secure unit where the girls would be locked up if they were there for, I don't know, murder or manslaughter. And then the other ones were in more open units, but they were incredibly damaged, I suppose, in many ways from their experiences, even as young as 12 or 13. So I managed that for 2 years. And when that shut down, I moved off to manage in Islington an area team, and that was fantastic fun. Lots of staff and lots of challenges there, and then moved eventually to another London borough, where eventually I then became fully into children's services and became an assistant director for children's services. So you're managing budget, staff, etc., homes.
Okay. So how did the sighted colleagues of yours find it? They are working under blind person point of view.
Yeah, I that's interesting. I think the clients, the customers, if you like, dealt with my blindness more easily than my colleagues did. Certainly in the early days, I think they were worried that suddenly they were going to have to do things for me as well as their own job. But suddenly, obviously, I having been a typist, so I could type up my records, and my record keeping was probably, 10 times better than the majority of the social workers around me. The kids were very good. They would look out for me. The truants would help me find various places if I hadn't been to an address before. There was all the kids out in the street, and they seemed to really take to me. Then moving on as a manager, that then became slightly less of an issue. But I think in some ways I had more problems with my own attitude, because I didn't want anyone to feel that I was asking them to do something, because I couldn't do it, and therefore I would tend not to ask them to do things, but carry on doing them myself. And that at times created a fair bit of stress. And in the end, I probably got through that. And I ended up with about 300 staff, 11 managers, 5 different sites. So it became much more of a management across a whole raft of things. So you were doing more one-to-one with managers and looking through their eyes at the frontline services.
Yeah. That's good. So it's quite difficult journey you had so far until now.
I think it was challenging. There were areas that obviously people weren't sure whether I should go into. So, for instance, when I was a social worker, I also trained as a mental health officer. So I would be able to go out and do mental health assessments, which you could then end up sectioning members of the public into mental hospitals. So you had quite a big responsibility. So you were, and often in times of potential conflict and danger as well. So you had to, be aware of what you were doing and where you were going. Obviously, the kids, the biggest children's home we had in the early days happened to be about 2 miles from where I live. So that's been it was handy. And then going through, you're obviously dealing with various crises. I dealt with the big influx and development of all the HIV/AIDS services in the 90s, which weren't really formatted. So we set up and had a very active HIV and AIDS team dealing with that sort of new threat, really, in terms of health. And lots of different things. We had massive influx from Ethiopia of unaccompanied minors. So we had 200 to 300 Ethiopian youngsters to to try and in some ways offer a service and support as well. So, you know, there were various different challenges which basically, you know, it was all shoulders to the wheel, and therefore my blindness really was irrelevant as long as I came up with the goods, really.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, apart from your career, you involved with the sports. When did you start playing sports or involved with the sports, Mike?
Well, that really was almost seamless. When I lost my sight age 10, I went to the blind school, and I thought, well, that's it. Obviously, I was very sporty, very much into my games and my sport, and was at a pretty low point, you know, low self-esteem. Everyone around you said what you would be fit for, what you were, you'll never do this, will never be able to do this, that, and the other, as opposed to, well, the world's your oyster, you can do anything you like, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And sport became really the crutch that I lent on to help me adjust to my blindness, but also then start looking at how well I was doing compared with my peers. So many of the youngsters around me had been blind from birth and did these amazing things at sport. And I wanted to be as good, if not better than them. So I had a bit of competition. And the third group really was to challenge people's expectations of me. My family obviously were shattered and weren't sure what I would be able to achieve. And the member and general public, I think, had a very low opinion of disability. Disability in their eyes meant inability. And I wanted to show them that I was able, I could do things. And I had an experience on a bus once where I got on with my mum, and people were talking about you as though you couldn't hear them as well. You know, you know, if you can't see, you can't hear as well. And someone said, who, you know, poor little so-and-so or something like that. And I said to my mum, who are they feeling sorry for? Who's got on the bus? And it turned out to be me. And that age 11 or 12 was so important because it made me so angry and so fired up that for the rest of my life, it's been, you know, getting people to look at your ability, but also then to challenge their perceptions of your disability.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, what sports are you involved with first time? Cricket, football, or skiing?
Cricket, football, athletics at school. They were the three main ones. We did five-a-side football indoors and outdoors. We did cricket, obviously using a small football. And we did athletics over at the local running track. Did a bit of rowing, again fairly ideal because you're in a boat and therefore you know you've got some sort of framework around you, and so those were the sort of the main four originally. And then as I started to get a bit older and when I left school. There was just nothing. Having been at the boarding school, there was just nothing for me to do in terms of sport at all. I joined a sports club for the blind, but they really weren't very active. I think they did rambling or something and a bit of cricket. And I said, no, okay, this is, you know, there's no point moaning about it. We tried to get change, but it wasn't possible. So I said, well, rather than moan about it and disrupt anything, we'll set a sports club up called Metro. And within a year of us forming Metro, I got invited to go with a group of people from Metro on a skiing trip to Norway, and just loved it. The freedom of movement. We had some guides who really loved they were Norwegian, so they loved their sport. And I just got the bug. And I went a couple of times. And just at that point, they announced that they were going to hold trials for the first Winter Paralympic Games for the disabled in 1976. And would I like to trial for the Games? And I went into the trials, got through, and managed to get selected to go and represent Britain in the first Winter Paralympics in 1976 in Sweden.
Congratulations! Yeah, that's good. That's good. You did the trial skiing. How did you feel? How did you feel about when you're doing the skiing with the guide and on that period?
I think initially it's that whole thing about transferring your trust to someone else to act as your guide or your eyes, and um, and I think it was good that we started with cross country, because the speed is far less than doing alpine skiing, and you're on very thin skis, so you don't have edging to turn like you do with alpine skis, and that gave me the confidence to transfer my if you like, to let someone else be my eyes on the ski slope. And you're doing 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, and then I did some marathon skiing, which is 42 kilometers in Switzerland and in Norway, and that gave me the confidence then to do some alpine skiing as well, which the speeds are higher, and you're then coming down behind a guide. Some of them now are using headsets, so you've got audio contact. I had a bit of a ruptured ligament, so I'm tended now to stop doing the alpine. But now, 50 years on nearly, I'm still organising groups from the UK to go to Norway for the annual ski event. So we should get you on it sometime, Gal. You should come over and try. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I will ask my wife's permission first. Yeah.
But it is fantastic. We last year and the year before, we had 25 blind and partially-sighted people from the UK, all primed to go, and then obviously the pandemic meant that was all stopped. But I've already got over 20 people putting their name down for March 2022, and so I'm really looking forward to being out there. And of course, I'll be well into my 70s by then, and thinking, oh well, perhaps it may be the time to start thinking about slowing down. And then I realized that one of the oldest blind skiers from America that takes part, he's 95, so I've got 20 odd years to catch him up.
Yeah, that's excellent. 95 years old. Yes,
and still skiing.
Okay, that's good to hear. And when you went to other parts of the world, not mentioning European countries, when you went to South Asian countries as a sports representing UK, as a cricket or any other sports, how did the non-disabled people felt about disabled people playing sports? Or what is their reaction on that?
It was very mixed. I mean, I've competed. I took the first cricket team to compete in the World Cup when that first blind cricket World Cup was held in India. We obviously then had to largely raise our own funds and get over there. And the people over here thought it was wonderful, but a bit mad. And then when we got to India, you just got the enthusiasm of everyone around that, blind cricket was suddenly taking off, and you saw the enthusiasm. What was apparent though was that they used a small ball because many of the countries don't use the ball that we use because it's got air inside it, and of course in hot climates that's not conducive. So we had to then change the structure of the ball that we were using. But we'd also went to South Africa. We had an invite to go, and I and a few of us said, look, we would not go while apartheid was in place. But as soon as the apartheid was, reduced or stopped, we then went over and, if you like, reintroduced blind cricket into South Africa. We had a mixed team of, we had people from Black, Asian and minority groups. We had right across the board, and we played at a blind school and showed them about the cricket. We got some sighted teams for them to play, and then we left them bats and balls and equipment and everything else. So to get, if you like, them having those opportunities that we'd had untaken for granted for so many years. And that was just fantastic.
Yeah, it is. I used to play blind cricket with you, Mike, a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was good fun, actually. There's a size 3 football. That's good fun.
Yeah. No, it is good, and the rules slightly change, and then we played some incredible matches against various celebrity teams and England women's cricket team, etc., etc. And we played at Lords and various other things. So again, it just has given us so much, to remember, really.
Yeah, it is. ஆமாம் நேர்களே, நீங்கள் பார்த்து கொண்டிருப்பது டேர்னிங் பாயிண்ட் நிகழ்ச்சி. உங்கள் ஆர்டிவி தமிழ் இன்டர்நேஷனல் தொலைக்காட்சி மூலமாக பார்த்து கொண்டிருக்கின்றீர்கள். இன்றும் நான் மாற்றுத்திறனாளி மைக் பிரேஸை பட்டியல் இருக்கின்றேன். அவர் பார்வையற்றவர், அவர் ஒரு ஸ்போர்ட்ஸ் பர்சனாலிட்டி மற்றும் நிறைய விடயங்கள் செய்திருக்கின்றார். இன்றும் உங்கள் நிகழ்ச்சியை ஸ்பான்சர் அனுசரணை வழங்கிக் கொண்டிருக்கின்றார்கள் streamyard.com. So Mike, can you tell us about the blind tennis that you started a few years ago with Metro, is that right?
That's right. Well, I think most of the blind tennis really started in Japan, and we managed to get some links with some people saying, had we thought about trying blind tennis in the UK? And again, you're thinking, what are they talking about? You mean blind tennis? And then found that it was largely played indoors. The rules are fairly simple, really. The ball for the totally blind can bounce 3 times one side of the net, and for the partially sighted twice. And it suddenly cooked off, really kicked off. And we've got dozens and dozens of people playing. There's a national tournament. We've had people playing internationally already. And it's just an amazing game. And the one big plus with it, it's something that blind parents can play with their children, and that is something again that just crosses those barriers. So sport has enabled that to cross that barrier and find a function that the kids and the parents can do together.
Yeah, that's good. What kind of ball is it they use?
It's a softer. It's not as hard as a tennis ball, so it's more of like a sponge external with then a rattly fixture inside. So as the ball is bouncing, you can hear it, and it will usually bounce 3 or 4 times before it will then stop bouncing, as it were. So it gives you a chance to hear the first bounce, to line up for it, the second bounce to get behind it, and the third bounce hopefully then to hit it. And then most of the rest of the rules, the serving, etc., are broadly the same. I think the net's slightly lower than usual, and it's normally now played indoors because obviously the acoustics and the sound is better than if you can hear it hitting a hard floor. And the rackets are smaller as well.
Okay. Is it a special racket or is it a smaller racket?
It's more like a children's racket. So they're smaller and general handle, but they're slightly smaller than an ordinary tennis racket.
Okay, that's good. So where do they practice at the moment, the blind?
They use Islington's centre down at Caledonian Road. There's 2 or 3 other ones over in South and West London. So there are at least 3 or 4 venues now where the tennis is played. But the main one for the totally blind is at Caledonian Road at the Islington Tennis Centre.
Okay, that's good. Another sports I was thinking of tandem bike for blind people. The tandem bike, can you explain to our viewers and listeners how does it work? People doesn't know anyway. Probably. Yeah.
Tandem bikes are obviously ideal for the blind because you're on the back. You've got a sighted person usually on the front who steers it. Hopefully pedals as well, but that's sometimes I've had people that have taken their feet off the pedal, and I thought it was pedaling hard, but actually they were being a bit cheeky and letting me do all the work. But basically you're on the back, your head down, and then obviously you're getting instruction from the guy if it's leaning right, left, etc., uphill, downhill, and you're getting information then from the person there. And again, fantastic, being out on the open roads. I've done quite a bit of tandem riding over the years. some long distance one I did from where I lived in Romford out to Frankfurt in Germany. So went across on the Channel and through Holland into Aachen, and then right the way through. And that was just a fantastic trip. We did 500 miles in 5 days, so it was quite a slog.
That's good. That's good. That's good. As long as you enjoyed it, that's
Oh yeah. No, the camaraderie was good. Occasionally it would go getting a bit grim when you're fairly sore and tired and stuff like that. But it was an amazing trip with some friends.
That's good. That's good. So you involved with Metro Blind Sports. It's going to be 50 years next year. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
50 years in 73, year after.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
1973 to 2023. So
that's good. Are you doing any celebration for that?
I think we will. I think we're planning something through that, and obviously it's led to so many things. Like I said, the skiing. It's led to me then helping to set up a number of sports bodies like British Blind Sport and the Ski Club for the Disabled, and of course the British Paralympic Association. So
and also Primary Club as well.
Primary Club, yeah, I'm a trustee of that. But setting up the Paralympic Association probably one of the biggest things, because that's obviously meant that hundreds and hundreds of people with a disability have had a chance to achieve their potential in terms of the sporting dreams that they've had.
Yeah, the Paralympics for UK, is that right?
Paralympics for the UK, and then of course I was on the bid team for London 2012, and then on the organising committee for London 2012. So to have an Olympic and Paralympic Games on your own doorstep and to be able to attend was, for me, the end of my dreams. Really, it was just unbelievable to have that opportunity in your own country.
That's nicely come to that question. How did you involve with that project, the 2020 Olympics and Paralympics?
Well, in 2001, I was on the board of the Paralympic Association, having helped set it up in the 80s, late 80s, and I then became a director in the sort of 90s, I suppose. And then 2001, we'd just come back from Sydney, where I was asked to go and help as part of the team organisation for the British team. And someone then said to me, would you be interested in standing as chairman of the Paralympics Association? And I said yes. So that was just unbelievable. And then in 2003, I'd been chair for about 18 months, 2 years. I got a phone call from the secretary of the British Olympic Association saying, we're going to put a bid in for London 2012 Games. Would you be interested in being on the bid committee? And I said, oh, this is just fantastic. And so I served on the bid committee, was part of the team delivering the games plan right the way through in Singapore. So I flew to Singapore with the bid team. We're in the room when we actually won the bid, when Rog opened the envelope and said it was London. So I'm dancing with all these sporting celebrities and legends of sport and me. And I just thought this was, and some of the venues were about 300 yards from where I was brought up in Hackney. You know, some of the venues down towards Eton Manor, etc., were literally on my doorstep. So it was almost literally coming home.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was quite an experience there, the event on that year, actually. Yeah.
Yes, no, it was, and I retired from work the same year, so I ended up going to the Olympics and the Paralympics, and I ended up retiring from work in 2012. Which so were lots and lots of things coming together then, all in one go. So it was a pretty memorable year for me in 2012 in many ways.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So, during the lockdown, Mike, blind and visually impaired people like to go out. During the lockdown, most of the people are were getting depressed and still getting depressed, mental health problem as well. Is Metro Sports doing any online activity for that kind of situation or anything like that?
Yes, I mean, they've been doing quite a lot of stuff with various exercises, various sports. Some of the sports have got sort of taster bits where people can practice tennis and various other bits. They've managed to get some videos done as well so people can actually see what the sports are. And I think for those of us that have been, if you like, sports-minded for many, many years, I think for me that's been a real savior of my mental health, because the discipline that you have from sport, the way of dealing with those sorts of situations. I mean, boredom, for instance, there's nothing more boring than when you're training and training and training, and it's just goes on and on and on. And in some ways, the mentality of being able to do that with a sport has helped me cope with the boredom of lockdown and not going out to meetings and not going out on. I haven't been on public transport for over a year now in any format, trains or tubes or buses. But the technology then has sort of crept in a bit now. So I've got a few Zoom meetings, but that whole mentality, Metro are certainly trying to help with that. So the quizzes, there's lots of online sessions, etc. And I think that's been really good.
And also you started online yoga session as well, is that correct?
Online yoga, there's chair yoga they've been looking at. There's a whole raft of different things that they've been looking at. And I did a group of skiers. We should have been in Norway a week before last. And so I managed to send an invite out saying, does anyone fancy a chat about it? And we had 27 people, all of whom had been to the ski week and were missing it. So we had a really lovely an hour and a bit, all talking about our time in skiing and what it's meant to us and what the fun we've had and the mishaps, etc. So that was an amazing thing. And that was coordinated with Chris Lewis from Metro, who did the sort of technology bit, and then I chaired it a bit and sorted a few bits out. So that was just brilliant, really.
That's good. So this kind of an online project, are you getting funding from a Vision Foundation or something? Is that correct?
No, they funded a number of the videos that Metro did, and no, I'm just again been supporting groups like Vision Foundation who have come out of the woodwork and really helped and sorted out funding for so many different projects at that sort of grassroots level. I've got a lot of time for what they do and how they've done it. So I've been supporting them. So I've been doing the odd online talks for them. I did a one last week where obviously proceeds will go to them as a charity. So I've been doing a few online after dinner type things for the different charities, and I've got a few coming up. But it just enables me then to use my verbal skills, if you like, in order for them to get some much needed funding.
That's good. Now come to exciting part of the conversation. This is your life, Red Book. Can you tell me?
Yes.
Tell me more about it, please.
I don't know whether viewers, listeners really know much about the big Red Book we had over here. This is your life. It did 1,144 episodes of it. And what it largely did was it largely surprised celebrities at a point when they weren't expecting to be collared. And then a range of guests came on and said various things about them. If you're an ordinary person like us, then I don't think anyone would ever expect that you would be collared for a program like that. Yeah. And in 1980, I obviously had been involved with setting up British Blind Sport and the Ski Club. I'd been over to Norway. I had a book published in 1980 called Where There's a Will. And Brian Johnson, the broadcaster, cricket commentator, etc., he was our club's president. And he said, oh, would you come and do an interview for me about blind cricket for Radio London or the World Service, I think it was, at the BBC. And I said, oh, fine. And then he said, I'll send a car. Now, I should have smelt a rat because obviously the World Service hardly have money to make programmes, let alone send a car for me. So I turned up at the studio in this taxi and was getting out just as Brian Johnson said, oh, before we go in, I'd like to meet a friend of mine, Eamon Andrews, who was the presenter of This Is Your Life. And he then said, for a very good reason, because tonight, Mike Brace, This Is Your Life. And it was just unbelievable. Yeah. And they had a few celebrity guests on there for me, as well as lots and lots of people that are important to me from my past.
So your wife Maureen knows beforehand, isn't it?
She knew beforehand, and I always said that, you know, she would never be able to keep a secret like that. But she did. She basically, they phoned her a year in advance and said, well, they were thinking of doing this program. And then said, but we'll only contact you 6 weeks beforehand if we go ahead, because basically they didn't think anyone could keep the secret for longer than that. And so a year before they went through the list and said, oh, this looks interesting. And then basically she didn't hear anything. And then in the beginning of October in 1981, they phoned her up and said, do you remember us? This Is Your Life. We're going to do Mike's program on the 10th of November. All systems go. And she kept the secret all the way through, and which was amazing, really.
That's good. When I was reading the book and you came back to change your clothes and you from the taxi, she was...
That's right. Yeah, well, I don't know if many of you have come across social workers, but I think we're almost pathologically unable to be on time for anything. Yeah. And my big day, I was supposed to be being picked up at 5:30 to get to the studio for 6:30, and I turned up at 5 to 6, still in my jeans and stuff. And Brian had said, "Oh, have something a bit better, you know, than your usual scruffy stuff on." So I thought, "Oh, well, I'll go in and quickly get changed." Got changed, got down, and then the car went from my house in outer London to the Strand, which is where the World Service is. And he did it in 31 minutes. We must have been doing 90 down the A13 or whatever. Yeah. And he pulled up just in time when we were scheduled to be there. So it was an amazing experience.
That's good. That's good. That's good. So we are talking about your awards, and before that, one of our greatest national treasures passed away a few days ago, Prince Philip. And you said you met him a few times. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was so proud and privileged in to receive in first honour I got was an OBE, which the Queen awarded me in 2005, I think. And then I later got a CBE, or like an upgrade, and that was presented by Princess Anne, who had also then been on the bid team and on the organising committee for London 2012. So by that stage, we were very much with each other. And then when the bid team came to London in 2005, I just got my OBE awarded. And basically, they said, "Oh, you probably won't hear anything till April, May to go and get the award." And then I got my award on the Thursday, and then the Friday we were invited to Buckingham Palace to have dinner with the Queen and Prince Duke of Edinburgh, and I then ended up chatting with the Duke of Edinburgh. He was just so funny and so good. He talked about his carriage racing. And I said to him, "Oh, sir, you're still driving then?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I'm still driving, I'm still drinking, and I'm still alive." And that was just so off the cuff, and chatting with him. And that was just unbelievable, being in something like that and having those sort of experiences with him.
That's good. That's good. It's quite a privilege, isn't it? When
Yes.
you're having a dinner with the Prince, Queen, and Prince.
I know, in Buckingham Palace, and then it was the day after she gave me the award, and I thought, well, she won't remember, obviously. And as soon as I walked in, she said, "Oh, Philip, I gave this man his award yesterday." So she'd either been very well briefed, or I did obviously stick out in her mind. And I've also been involved with the Round Table, you know, the fundraising and men's sort of group, and he's the national president of that. So again, we had that in common, and he saw my Round Table badge, and we had a chat about Round Table and what it did for fellowship and fundraising in communities. So again, really, really interesting, and obviously. That almost prompted me then, that experience, to do the second book, the Don't Ask Me, Ask the Dog, because basically I'd had all those experiences. So I started writing that after that in 2013.
That's good. So when is the Don't Ask Me, Ask the Dog came out?
It came out in 2017. And in 2018, I then did a redraft of the first book, Where There's a Will, and then put them both self-publishing on Amazon in print and also on Kindle. So, and then the RNB in England did the audio book of it, the talking book of it. So both of those are now on the Talking Book Library in the RNB as well. So, and it's been amazing because, again, you know, the response you get, the reviews you get on Amazon, but also when I've been doing the talks, it's enabled me then to sell a few copies of the book, and then the money from that also then goes to the various charities that I support. So that's enabled me to raise quite a few £1,000s more for the charities that I've been supporting.
That's good. That's good. So we'll mention to our viewers and listeners, RNIB stand for Royal National Institute for the Blind.
Yeah.
That's good. ஆமாம், நீங்கள் பார்த்து கொண்டிருப்பது டேர்னிங் பாயிண்ட் நிகழ்ச்சி RTV தமிழ் இன்டர்நேஷனல் தொலைக்காட்சி மூலமாக பார்த்து கொண்டிருக்கின்றீர்கள். இன்று நான் மாற்றுத்திறனாளி மைக் பிரேஸை பற்றி கொண்டிருக்கின்றேன். ஒரு ஸ்போர்ட்ஸ் பர்சனாலிட்டி மற்றும் அவர் ஒரு ராயல் ஃபேமிலியை சந்தித்த ஒரு பிரமுக கெஸ்ட் அவர். இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியை ஸ்பான்சர் பண்ணி கொண்டிருக்கின்றார்கள் streamyard.com. So what do you think about the normal society as a disabled person point of view now? That's we touched base on earlier on. Can you tell me more about it?
I think there have been some progress. I think there are more images of people with disability on television now, with presenters, with comedians with disability, etc. So I think there are more images of a variety of people with a disability that do challenge people's perceptions. But you know, like you, probably there used to be not a day that went by where you think, oh, well, this is getting better, and then someone will say something or do something pretty stupid. And you know, when before I got my guide dog, I said I'd never get a guide dog, and then changed my mind in 2010. But you know, up until that point, people would often say, "Oh, do you not have a blind dog?" And I'd say, well, if I had a blind dog, I'd have to have another dog to show it where to go. I said, do you mean a guide dog? And they said, yeah. And it's those sorts of things. People see the disability first and not the person. And that still catches you out. You know, I think it has improved. I think it has improved generally. But occasionally you don't let your guard down too much because you'll easily trip up where someone will say something not necessarily meaning to be offensive, but or they'll talk to my wife instead of me. They'll say, "Oh, does he take sugar?" And she'll say, "Well, if you ask him, he might tell you," and things like that. So those things still happen. Or if I'm upset with something, they'll look at my wife to say, "Oh, he's going into one. What's the matter with him?" As if to say, rather, because I can't do the eye contact, so I can't see the attitude. They'll look at my wife or someone with me to say, "What's the matter with him?" or "Is he upset?" sort of thing, instead of actually having that discussion.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
But it is better. It is better than 50, 60 years ago when you never saw people with a disability. You never had the confidence. We were our own worst enemies because we believed what people said, that we weren't able, we weren't fit to do anything. And we started to believe that and almost accept that. And I think there's a number of people like yourself and others that are doing jobs or doing things that no one would ever expect us to do. And that has to continue, and there needs to be more of us to do it.
Yeah, because we need to work more hard than sighted people. That's the main thing. Double the amount. Yeah.
You do the 10%, the 20%, the 50%. When I was working in social work, if I'm having to read materials, then I need to get someone to read their materials for me and listen to it and make notes, etc., etc. And you can't just sit there with it in front of you at meetings. You've got to do your homework, so you have to do that extra, percentage to be as good. And of course, most of the time, you have to be better in order to be equal, because basically the expectation is such that you're going to fail.
It is. It is. So, Mike, can you tell us about the Deputy Lieutenant London, the position? What is the involved and how did you get this position?
Again, it's a bit like the honours. You're never quite sure who's nominated you or why you've been put forward. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I got a contact saying, would I come up to it's actually the Welsh office in London for a meeting of deputy lieutenants. And I went up there, and I don't know whether I expected like a reception, but there was sort of 25 people, and it was obvious that they were looking at me as a potential deputy lieutenant. Yeah. And what it is, each area, each county in London and Britain has a Lord Lieutenant, and they are effectively the Queen's agent in the communities. Their role really is to act as a liaison between the Queen and the royal family and the areas that they cover. And each area, depending on the size of it, is then allowed a number of deputies. So in London, I think we're entitled to have about 100 deputies. I think there are about 80 at the moment. And basically, you're the local representatives of the Queen in the boroughs or in the areas that you're living. And within that 80, there are representative. In London, there are 32 boroughs, 32 areas. And each of those then have what they call a representative deputy lieutenant. So they're the senior deputy lieutenant. And then the rest of us support the work that they're doing. So in my borough, there's 2 or 3 of us that are deputy lieutenants, and it could be you're giving prizes, it could be you're attending functions from the council outwards. When there are royal visitors, you'd be involved in the hosting of them and sorting that out. We assess for the Queen's Award for voluntary service, the Queen's Award for business. There's a cross-faith council to looking at getting cross-faith issues. And for me, that's just been absolutely outstanding. And assessing the Queen's Awards, you get to see fantastic voluntary organisations right across London who have been nominated for the Queen's Award. And I assess them and make recommendations. And we're just about waiting for the results of the last round of assessments.
Good luck with that. Yeah, because
And it's totally voluntary, and you pay for everything. So you're not funded, you're not sponsored. Everything you do, even down to your travel, etc., it's all covered by yourself. And again, I like that. I don't think I think it would detract from it if somehow you are being funded or money was coming to us rather than to the projects or to the activities. So it's totally self-funded and not costing. And if you go to a dinner, then you pay for that as well as your transport.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. I think it's good.
It is. So, can you tell us about your speaking engagement? How does it work? And
yeah, over the years I've done a lot of after dinner speaking, and I got into that by accident. One of the groups I mentioned earlier, the round table, said, "Oh, could you come and do a talk for the round table?" And I'd never really heard of them, and I got involved and got asked to go into another round table, and then a few more, and then Rotaries and stuff like that. And then it started to become, you're more and more well known, and then people were wanting to pay you to come and speak at a conference or a commercial do. And again, the money that I could then get in went to the different charities that I've been supporting. So now, after 40 odd years, 50 years nearly of talking, I've just hit, I think, £750,000 now from the different fundraising activities. So for me, it's been a way of being able just to give something somewhere to other people and enjoying it while I was doing it.
That's good. That's congratulations on that. Yeah. So you involved with the Vision 2020, the organization. When was it you involved with that, Mike?
Well, I left social work in 2001 to set up the Vision 2020 UK. Australia were the first national Vision 2020, and the headquarters of the global organisation was in Hyderabad. And we had an office then based in London as well. And I then helped set that up and became the first chief executive in 2001. And then I left that in 2012, and sadly, it changed its name briefly to Vision UK instead of Vision 2020 as we were arriving at 2020. And sadly, ironically, in 2020, it actually folded because it was funded by a whole range of charities who themselves then just didn't have the funds. So it actually folded last summer in 2020. So we'd done nearly 20 years. And its legacy obviously was a whole raft of collaborative working arrangements across the sectors, because it had the social services sector, the voluntary sector, and the health sector all then working together under one collaborative structure.
That's good. Thank you for doing this interview for nearly over an hour now for my Turning Point show on RTV Tamil International. What do you want to say to RTV Tamil viewers and listeners, Mike?
I think for me, it's really what we've touched on, that there are so many things that can affect us in our day-to-day lives, and partly we're in control of that and partly we're not. And I think for me, it's take more control over the things that we can affect and start to challenge those perceptions out there. So the more we do and the more we say, I think the more we'll be heard and the more we'll achieve.
That's good analyzation, and thank you very much for your coming for our show. And thank you again, and speak to you soon, and see you in a few minutes.
Great pleasure.
ஆமாம் நேர்களே, இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியை இத்துடன் நிறைவேற்றிக் கொண்டு மீண்டும் அடுத்த வாரம் மற்றொரு நிகழ்ச்சியில் சந்திக்கும் வரை உங்களிடமிருந்து விடைபெறுவது உங்கள் கௌரிசன் ரத்னராஜா. அந்த டர்னிங் பாயிண்ட் நிகழ்ச்சியை ஸ்பான்சர் பண்ணவர்கள் streamyard.com மற்றும் Braille Translations Limited. நன்றி, வணக்கம்.